Hi, I'm Charles. I'm an instructor at East Texas Historical Fencing, and I will be talking today about how to get started practicing with rapier. So, before me I have an assortment of different rapiers that are available on the market today, and I have an assortment of different forms of gear that I think are necessary for you to consider before you begin. So, we're going to start with a basic history of what the rapier is. The rapier was an early to mid-Renaissance weapon that was developed as a civilian use dueling weapon. It saw some use in warfare, but it was pretty limited. It was usually used as a dueling weapon between the members of the nobility. So, we had many different forms that show up in history, both historical examples, pictures and manuals, versions you can go see in museums, and there are many sparring rapiers that are available today for purchase. My personal rapier is a cup hilt style rapier. This to me is the best of both worlds of what you can purchase. It has a mid-sized grip. It has a cup that protects your hands. There are no perforations where you can eat a stab through the guard. It has long quillins used for parrying. It has a slightly lighter blade than some historical examples, and it has a heavy pommel, and it is a very back-heavy weapon, which means that I have a lot of control in my disengages and in my distance. There are other versions available as well that you can buy. However, as a beginner, because I myself thought that a rapier like this was very aesthetically pleasing. However, you'll notice it does not have the same kind of quillins, which means that when you begin to learn how to do rapier and you begin to learn how to parry and how to attack with your sword, you'll notice yourself at an extreme disadvantage by not having what it might be a necessary mechanical piece that a lot of swords have, that almost every sword has a long cross guard. And this one not having one puts you at an immediate disadvantage, especially as a beginner. As a more advanced student or a more advanced practitioner, you will notice that not having it, you can build a game around that. But when you're first starting out, I recommend, despite how beautiful this sword is, not starting with something like this. Next, you find other swept hilt rapiers like this one. You'll notice this one is really simple. This is a budget sword that you can purchase on a couple of different websites, but you'll notice the handle is very long. And the handle is very long because they expect you to wear a heavier glove with a rapier. Normally with rapier, I tend to use much lighter leather, floppy gloves like this. These are deerskin. You can purchase these online as well. And the reason it has a longer handle is to accommodate that larger glove, and you use a larger glove because your hand is extremely open in a sword like this. And once again, as a beginner with a swept guard like this one, despite it having the correct quillins, you'll notice you eat it in the hands, it'll slide through and hit you in the hands, you'll get cut in the hands, you'll get cut in the pinkies, and the last thing you want to do when you're starting out is break your fingers. Despite the price of this sword, I don't recommend buying a sword like this one when you first start out. There are other forms of cup hilt rapiers. These were designed for use within the Spanish system. You'll notice they have a much shorter grip and a wider pommel for the specific way that they like to handle their sword. If you attend a school that uses the Italian tradition, you will notice that the grip that they teach you fits oddly in your hand as this pommel wants to sit in the back side of your palm. Or an even better example is this really short grip sits in the middle of your palm. And since most Italian grips rest here at this part of your hand and require a lot of certain kind of wrist work or elbow work, you'll notice that this sword doesn't work well for the thing that you're trying to learn. It is possible that you can be discouraged simply because of a bad purchase that you made. In regards to protection, the best protection on the market is always a cup hilt rapier. Because when you're in your proper grip, when you're in your extended positions, nothing can get through this, nothing can cut around it. Only if you're doing something wild and your hand exposes itself will you ever eat an attack to this part of your hand. So I recommend starting out, find yourself a cup hilt rapier that you like and try not to focus too much on how much it costs. My instructor has told me you can buy what will work or you can buy what you want. If you buy what will work, oftentimes you will buy what you want anyway later and you'll end up spending more money. So it's better for you to just use the loaner swords at your school until you can afford and save up for the sword that's right for you. Despite my previous advice, if you see a cup rapier like this and think, wow, that's really ugly and I hate it, but I still want to do rapier, that's okay. There are other options that you can go with as well. This is a fluted clamshell rapier. Can be aesthetic to some people. It offers pretty much the same protection with a couple of exceptions. You can get a flat clamshell rapier, basically the same thing. Usually the less detail on your sword, the cheaper as well. And finally, there is what's called a dish hilt rapier, like this one. And it's just a little, almost foil-esque dish here on the front. And those all act more or less the same way and protect you from mostly the same things. And if you say to me, Charles, I've seen the price of rapiers. This is not a cheap hobby, as most adult hobbies are not. However, there is an option. You can purchase a synthetic rapier. If you have to purchase this, it's okay. I don't recommend this for everyday use. I do not recommend this for sparring or anything, but if you must have something to drill with at home, this is a perfectly okay approximation of a rapier. It's a cup hilt, it's light, it's easier on your joints, and it's usually far cheaper than most steel options. A lot of people have a misconception where they think of this sword, a small sword or a court sword, as being a rapier, and they get that misconception from films like Zorro, or from The Count of Monte Cristo, or for Pirates of the Caribbean, great swashbuckling films. However, this is an evolution of what the rapier became later in civilian use as a dueling weapon or as a status symbol. As you can see how ornate this one is. It's just, look at me, I'm rich, is what this sword is. This has a tri-blade with no real edge. It doesn't cut very well, and if it did cut, you cut with the tip, and it's almost only a thrusting weapon. And so a lot of people, when they get into rapier, they're thinking this is what they're going to get to use, when in reality, their instructor hands them that, and they're like, oh, this is not what I wanted to use. So understand that before you begin. Other misconceptions are that rapiers are a lighter weapon, but often this sword, this long sword, and this rapier weighs more than this long sword. So when you begin to do rapier, understand if you've already got some long sword experience and you're used to waving this sword around in two hands, now all of a sudden you have that weight plus a few grams and one arm holding it out at extension quite often, and you begin to notice, oh, my forearms are getting tired, and my shoulders getting tired, and my wrists beginning to hurt. The last thing we want is for people who are trying to get started in rapier to get discouraged by either fatigue from their body, a poor purchase that they made in ignorance, or some other issue, like they begin to start with something they shouldn't. A lot of people see rapier and dagger. Daggers are cool. However, early on it becomes a crutch. Now all of a sudden you have something that allows you to fail more often and get away with it. So I recommend when you start rapier, if you have a dagger already, that's cool, just put it away. Just pretend you don't have one. Two things to prevent fatigue with a rapier is number one is your grip, and number two is what muscles you're engaging to hold your sword. Most rapier grips, from the Italian system especially, are what I would consider to be a handshake grip, or a pistol grip, as you could call it. And it's where the back three fingers grip the actual grip of the sword, and your thumb and your forefinger grip what's called the ricasso, and your forefinger rests here and your thumb rests here, and you grip it almost as though you're gripping a pistol or you're going to shake somebody's hand. And you hold it at extension in this way. A lot of people feel like they need to put two fingers around it because it's heavy, and they death grip it with these three fingers, and you can see my white knuckles death gripping, and I'll eventually put my hand to sleep doing this. Or they do what's called a hammer fist. The irony, of course, being that this is also the incorrect way to grip a hammer, but they do what's called a hammer fist grip, and they just caveman it around in this way, or they attempt to do what they've seen rapier, but if you notice when I hold it extension, my sword here is at an obtuse angle when it should be at 180 degrees with the correct grip. So the correct grip, hammer fisted grip, white knuckle grip. The second reason that people begin to feel fatigue from the rapier is they're not engaging the correct muscle groups. Oftentimes they're engaging their forearm and their upper arm when they should be engaging their trapezius and their pectoral muscles. When you hold your sword, you bring your shoulder inwards so that you hold with your chest, and you tighten your back, and you can hold this extension in guard for far longer than if you're just standing straight and trying to hold with your elbows or with your shoulder. Next, we want to talk about different forms of gear, minimum gear requirements for you to start practicing rapier with another person. The most important piece of gear for any fencer, for any tradition, for any weapon is your mask. The first purchase you should make is a mask that fits you. If you're doing historical fencing, you need to purchase a brand that is well known amongst other historical fencers. There are many different forms that you can purchase. This is a mask with no overlay. This is a mask with an overlay. Some people like to paint their masks. Other people like to leave their masks bare. It's really up to you. It's just something fun that you can customize. The next thing that you should purchase is neck protection, or a gorget, or if you're English, a gorget. There are many different forms on the market. This is, for all intents and purposes, a modified hockey neck protector that we have modified to use for historical fencing. There are really fancy options like my personal version here. These can get very expensive very quickly, but even the cheapest gorget on the market is sufficient for drilling at home and light sparring. The next thing that you should purchase is a pair of gloves for two reasons. One, you don't want to wear out your hands, and two, you don't want to damage the grip of your sword. For light drilling and for light sparring, I recommend some form of cheaper leather glove. There are also plastic options if you want to go for a vegan option, but some sort of malleable, light, easy to wad up, easy to use, easy to put on glove. Next, for competition, personally, I like to wear a little bit heavier glove. You can purchase these from different HEMA vendor websites, but these are, for all intents and purposes, these are motorcycle gloves, essentially. And you can purchase these from different areas on the internet, but they're just a couple little plates, a little bit thicker leather, and a little bit more arm protection for those hits that you can't calculate coming at you when you're fencing strangers. Next, as we spoke about earlier, if you have a more open guard, I might even recommend you using a lacrosse or a hockey glove. Next, as your footwork begins to progress, you want to start thinking about different kinds of shoes that you can wear. I am currently wearing a form of Olympic shoes that you can purchase. There are other kinds of Olympic shoes that have a very specific design to them. You will notice the arrowhead toe. They have a very thick heel. In fact, these have super extra heel protection. And the top of the shoe is wider than the bottom of the shoe for a specific reason. When some people make a lunge, they drag their back foot like this, and we can talk later about the mechanics of that, but shoes made for fencing mitigate that by adding a rubber piece here that allows for a safer drag of your foot. If you're wearing a regular tennis shoe that you can purchase, then you will notice that the bottoms are wider for the sake of comfortability and traction on the ground, but those will often catch on the ground and people will roll their ankles. So you want to really watch out for the kind of shoes that you're using, especially while doing rapier. Now, fencing shoes that are made for fencing are oftentimes very expensive, oftentimes close to $200. And I realize that's a lot of money, so there are some budget options that you can look at. You can purchase used Formula One shoes on places like eBay, and these shoes are usually sub $50. They have the same arrowhead design, they have the same strong heel protection, and they have the same wider at the top and skinnier at the bottom, and these are absolutely usable as fencing shoes as well. You can also purchase newer versions. These are also Formula One shoes, still have good heel protection, good toe, pointed toe, and also no ridge for you to catch yourself on. If you're training inside, these are all perfect options. There are a couple options I don't have here on the table. You can purchase wrestling or boxing shoes. Those are often high top. They usually come up to about here on your ankles, sometimes lower, sometimes even higher. My only problem with those is many times shin protection that's offered in the HEMA market often goes pretty low down your shin, and you'll find that it ends up clashing not aesthetically, but physically with the shoe that you're wearing. And sometimes those may not be the best option for you, but they are far cheaper than fencing shoes, and they're usually commercially available, both used and new websites. If you're outside, I don't recommend any of these shoes because they're all super flat, and there's a high chance that if you're fighting in the grass, you're fighting in the dirt, you'll slip. And the last thing you want to do as a beginner is pull your hamstring, roll your ankle, blow your knee. So, trail running shoes break the rule of everything I had just said. They have a wider bottom, but they have really good traction. And if you're outside, the last thing you want to do is slip and slide and do the splits before you're ready to do something like that. So let's talk about the next important part of gear, which is an athletic cup. This is a primary thrusting weapon. You are going to eat thrusts all over your body, and the groin is no exception. So for the guys especially, when you purchase an athletic cup, let's talk personally for a minute. Let's talk about buying an athletic cup. When you purchase an athletic cup, the two biggest criteria are comfortability and does it fit. Guys, look at me. Be honest with yourselves. When you go to the store or you go online and you see small to extra large, do a little bit of soul searching and purchase the right size, because there's nothing like having the wrong size athletic cup while you're trying to move around athletically. Be honest with yourselves, for me and for you. Next thing we want to talk about is chest protection. There are multiple forms of chest protectors that you can purchase. This is a super basic one. This is not very expensive. It wears kind of like a set of suspenders or kind of like a reverse backpack, and it goes usually under your jacket. Some people wear them over their jackets. I don't wear one at all. That's a personal preference. I'm happy to eat it in the chest because I prefer my mobility. However, if you don't have a jacket and you're trying to drill with your friends, this is far cheaper than purchasing a jacket. And if you have it, you have it. And if you stop using it, you can give it to somebody else less fortunate than you. Next things that you can buy fencing pants, you can buy fencing jackets, fencing socks. When you buy fencing jackets, you'll notice a lot of the ones that are commercially available are uncomfortable on your bare skin, so they make stuff called a rash guard, which is essentially a dry fit long sleeve shirt that you wear under a lot of your gear. I'm wearing one right now. I'm not going to take my jacket off and show you, but my assistant here is wearing an easily commercially available, pretty cheap rash guard. You can purchase those online, probably at Amazon. As you progress in your rapier career, you'll notice that you start getting targeted in certain areas of your body that give a lot more pain than you expect them to, and places like that are your knees, your elbows, and your forearms. And so what you want to do is you will eventually purchase hard shell protection like these knee pads here. These are a set that I like to wear. I wear elbow guards with my light jacket, and often when I'm sparring I'll wear arm guards, and sometimes I'll even wear shin guards too, and ankle protection if I can fit those around my shoes. When purchasing certain gear, you will notice that some of your friends in your club will have certain kinds of knee pads or elbow pads that work for them with the jacket and pants that they wear, but when you buy your own jacket and pants, you'll notice that those same pads don't work on the pants, or they don't have arming points that attach your elbow pads, so you might have to do a little custom work to your own gear even after you buy it. That's just kind of the reality of the small sport that we have created. There are dozens of jackets available on the market today that you can buy. When buying gear, one of the most important things for you to do is not just to go to a website and buy what you think looks cool, or buy what you want to buy. What's most important and what's really helpful is if you have a club with multiple members, lots of different types of loaner gear, then you can try a lot of different things that you like. There are really specific preferences of my own gear that that aren't commercially available that I have to have custom made. So for instance, for me, I like my sleeves to be shorter than most commercially available jackets. And the reason for that is because I like my glove to fit over my jacket and have better wrist mobility instead of it bunching up onto my sleeve. Some people like to have their sleeves super tight around their arms. Some people like to have their sleeves super wide. And you won't know any of this until you try a jacket on for yourself and you test one out. So to keep from spending a ton of money, do your best to test out everything that you're going to purchase first, whether it be at an event or whether it be within your own school and their loaner gear or some of your friends' gear, and try to make an informed decision about anything that you buy. And that includes swords, gear, shoes, socks, everything that has to do with fencing.